before her mask slipped and the banshee appeared. Her mother poked through Beth's findings, flicking out debris from the mound of glass and gum nuts. "Honestly, darling, you should just go to a nightclub and get drunk." Beth thought she'd been helpful on this clear, fine day. Yet, this dismissal. Stung, she waited for an explanation, but her mother was rubbing roughened bark from a gnarled tree root, only to toss it away. "It wouldn't need a father, and you wouldn't even have to raise it if you want to finish a PhD. I could." She stood, easing the tension from her back. Beth stared, confounded. It was a baby. With the toe of her sneakers, she prodded at a piece of green glass stuck stubbornly in the dried mud. A child wasn't an it, made up of found objects. When Beth had children, she would raise them herself. As mischievous, witty, resourceful as any in those novels, she felt a flare of rage. Beth's yearning for an idealized childhood had been the motivation for her dissertation topic. "I'm submitting next year. Hopefully. There's plenty of time," Beth said, giving up on the green glass, and sat on a rock. She shoveled the mound of gatherings into the basket, absent-mindedly pulling the wings from gum nuts and crumbling them between her fingers. Her research question was on issues of authorship in Enid Blyton's novels. Specifically, Beth refuted the contention in current scholarship that the author's imagination had been stymied by limited life experiences, leading to repetition of plots and themes. Beth proposed that it was this lack of variety that inspired Blyton's prolific flights into fancy. "Stop that." Beth looked at the pile of wings and bodies at her feet. "You should consider it." Her mother brandished a black feather to sweep in the view of gently rocking boats and, in the far distance, hazy hills. "All the fresh air and clean living it would have, not like on the Gold Coast." An exaggerated shudder. "It was crass then. I can only imagine it's worse now. Seedy and superficial. Artificial." Beth opened her mouth, but in truth couldn't defend her hometown of Southport against this arrow. The tans and boobs were as fake as the Versace that draped them. But the Gold Coast wasn't all nightclubs and tourist dives. "Send it down to me, and I'll give it back when it's a teenager." Her mother laughed, braiding the feather into the rope of gray dreadlocks down her back. "Your problem, then." Beth scowled. After her parents' divorce, she'd only acted out because she thought that she might finally gain her father's attention. "You cannot be serious." Beth didn't want to bring a child of hers into the world this way. She was already too much like her mother to want to repeat her mistakes. Author's note to mother. It really was a ridiculous suggestion. "How funny." Beth forced a smile at the pair of clowns. They wore the baggy trousered garb of overgrown kindergartners, slapstick tripping over their shoes, painted like life-sized fairground dolls, male versions of Warzel Gummage's Aunt Sally. Beth was unnerved. The reality was saggy jowls, stained teeth, and runnels of sweat in the painted masks, men demeaning themselves for a forced laugh. "Watch the one with the braces," she whispered to Jack. "It'll be part of the act for one of them to dack the other." Lucy Ann leaned across. "That's not funny. That's bullying. You said we should tell on bullies at school." "Well, yes, but you have to laugh when clowns do it." Beth pronged her fingers at the corners of her mouth, then at her eyes to direct Lucy Ann's attention. Context was difficult to define. And now wasn't the time. The blonde woman in front glared pointedly, as much as Botox allowed. Always another mother listening, noticing, marking Beth out, judging her ability to control the twins. Too much or not enough. Mothers, she'd learned, could spew never-ending commentary. Maybe because they didn't have the power of a single word to get their darlings to fall into line. The older, hatless clown tripped himself, only to get up and go down again. The crowd fake laughed. Ben smoothed down the dog-eared licks of Jack's hair. "Laugh," she urged the twins, as her own smile dropped. Their identical faces split, revealing perfect teeth and pink tongues colored fairy floss rainbow. Her pigeon pair. Beth dug her fingertip into her cheek, lifted but hadn't the will. Jack's and Lucy Ann's was genuine laughter. Full-bodied, rhythmic, continuing when, on cue, the audiences ceased. In the sudden hush, mothers narrowed their eyes, pinpointing their lack of decorum. Her lack. But the husbands and fathers made half-hearted grins, reached out hands to touch their own sons and daughters. Beth exhaled sharply in alarm, hissed for them to shush. "A volunteer!" the hatless clown demanded, his pallor more zombie-like in the slickening heat. The twins still jerked, issuing small hee-hees. "Quiet," Beth said, desperate, waning. Too late. No time to ponder the inefficacy of her command. The zombie clown locked eyes with her and closed the distance. She could have drowned in the soupy air. Her mind gasped for exits, her body grasped by the pinching prodding of her children. Beth swam up, took a deep breath, and placed a limp finger on her chest. "Me?" she mouthed. Over the shoes of husbands and fathers once more, then she stepped into the aisle, unsure her feet would not betray her and shift into fins, sending her slithering into a slop of humiliation at the ring's barrier. All eyes were on her, and she took what she was offered without question, and, finding an anchor, registered the object in her hand. A lemon. The clown with braces played to the crowd, antics juvenile, as he produced a tall spike such as the ones park rubbish collectors might use, and made suggestive actions. Beth glanced towards Jack and Lucy Ann. They sat on the edge of their seats, waiting, watching. Why she'd been given a lemon, she couldn't imagine. The swampy pulp in her stomach settled. This'd be an experience to recount later, she thought, casting her mind forward and then back. "Remember that time in our childhood when we went to the circus and you were part of the act?" So, Beth listened carefully to her instructions. "Throw it," she repeated. The clown with the spike nodded, jabbing a finger at Beth, making an arc in the air to the pointed end of his spike, eliciting a ripple of laughs. Beth's neck flushed. They were so inured to obeying this contract. A clown just had to scratch his arse to be thought hilarious. Beth wondered if people simply laughed out of fear of what might happen if they didn't. The spell broken. Beth couldn't mess this up. She steadied her focus on the clown. With an exaggerated hip swagger, he leaned back, positioning the flat end of the spike on his chin so that it was almost perpendicular. Burning with shame, she'd been unable to clarify exactly what would occur once she'd thrown the lemon. An ordinary supermarket lemon, wasn't it? She enclosed the fruit, its waxy skin now slippery in her palm. The clowns had seemed too close. Now they were too far away. She squinted at the spike, heard the echoes of future memories told, and chanted silent affirmations. Beth hadn't played ball sports, team sports, growing up. Not the sports where parents rallied